Let's open up the Black Series 6-inch figure of Luke Skywalker, Imperial Light Cruiser from The Mandalorian. Varykino. If it's Star Wars, we collect it. Hello there, thanks for visiting Varykino. The Black Series is a line that we have collected on and off since it first launched, but it wasn't until the release of The Mandalorian where we really jumped in and started collecting the Black Series full-time alongside our beloved 3.75-inch line. So we've been really trying to collect up as many characters and figures from The Mandalorian in the 6-inch line as we can. Now, when this Luke Skywalker figure was originally released during Hasbro's plastic-free packaging era with those blind boxes, we never found him here in New Zealand. We hunted around. He must have been super popular. We sadly never got him. So I'm really excited to see this particular figure being reissued in the archive line, so I can finally add him to my collection. I can't wait to open him up. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Coming up really soon, I'll get this figure off the backing card so we can take a closer look at all of the details. But first, let's take one last look at the packaging. The packaging style for the archive series of Black Series 6-inch figures is a little bit plainer than some of the other boxes, and certainly a lot plainer alongside those beautiful anniversary carded figures with their replica Kenner backing cards. So I don't mind opening these ones up, even if it does mean cutting the bubble off. Down the side we have the character name Luke Skywalker, and a little bit hidden by the bubble we also have the subtitle there, Imperial Light Cruiser, because of course this is from The Mandalorian, a little bit different in his outfit to as we see him in Return of the Jedi. We've got one figure here with one lightsaber accessory and a soft goods cloak. I really can't wait to see that out of the packaging. We've got a cardboard insert here in the front bubble here with a bit of a black and white sort of style line art picture here of Luke, mostly covered by the cloak. We don't see a lot of costume detail there. And down the side we have the title Archive, and we have a light grey panel that extends behind the figure. Fantastic for giving us a bit more contrast for dark colored characters like Luke wearing his dark tunic and black robe. If it was all black, I doubt we'd see a lot of details. So even if you do want to keep yours bubbled, it does look pretty cool, a nice contrast there. And we've just got that Black Series logo there at the top. We've got a fun little sort of triangular cutout here, which is mirrored with the corner being sort of cut off and removed there from the bubble. Overall, very tidy, but again, not my favorite compared to some of the other packaging styles. The bubble on this one in particular is just a bit more extended below the edge of the backing card. So this one, my example, is very unsteady. It kind of wants to tip forward. So unfortunately, most of the time these ones do stand up on their own. This one is not great. The bubble is just very sort of extends beyond that cardboard backing card there. So definitely need to open this one up. On the back, we've got that same art larger here. So it's a bit clearer. Really nice likeness of Mark Hamill there as Luke Skywalker on the back there. And we have a picture of the original release packaging for this particular figure, which came out in 2023. Really interesting that we're having such a recently released figure already being reissued in the archive line, but I'm really happy about it because I could never find this one. We have there the name again, Luke Skywalker, Imperial Light Cruiser, and a short blurb here. When the Mandalorian embarks on a mission to save Grogu from Moff Gideon, he receives unexpected help in the form of Luke Skywalker, and that's repeated in a few different languages. Something I do like about this Black Series carded figure is just how small the text on the back is here. Something that I find a little bit annoying with some of the vintage collection figures, how much of the back of the card, almost half of it, is taken up with the sort of copyright warning barcode and all of that kind of stuff. We've just got a nice small section here down the bottom, and we have a little bit of that on the cardboard insert inside the bubble there as well. Kind of tidy, a little bit dark of course, but it's just kind of, for me, it feels like it's just very simple because it's intended for people to open these and add them to their collection. If you're really fussy about packaging, you're probably going to hunt down either the original box or perhaps one of those beautiful anniversary carded versions, which are mostly the older ones. I would love to see some, you know, real interesting sort of vintage style carded figures from The Mandalorian with the character art down the side. That would be really cool, but I'm excited to have this one in my collection, and because I'm not too worried about the bubble, I'm going to be opening it up right now. So now I have the Luke Skywalker figure out of the packaging, as well as his one lightsaber accessory, so we can go over all of the details. And of course, now that we have him out of the packaging, we can fully see the soft goods cloak that was tucked in behind the figure. It was actually inserted through the plastic tray. I like it when they do that. It keeps it nice and tidy behind the figure, so it's not really being sort of squashed underneath the figure. It's just kind of tucked through that little slit there in the back. And I think it's interesting to see that for the first time in many of the Black series that I've opened, this is actually longer than the figure is tall. You can see just how much it actually flows onto the desk here in the front, which I think is interesting. A lot of Jedi cloaks and Vader cloaks and things like that tend to skirt just above sort of where the ground level would be for the figure. This one is very long in the front. You can see through at the back, it's not touching at the back, so it's a little bit more sort of heavy to the front. Now I'm thinking that might be, so when we sort of extend the arms out beyond the cloak, say with lightsaber or force moves, that this will still be long enough to reach near the ground. So I'm hoping that that is kind of the reason why it is so long there in the front. So if we sort of have Luke's hand sort of coming out doing a force move, it's going to look really cool in that particular pose. It really does completely cover the figure. It does have a little bit of an angle, so we can see the silver belt buckle detail sort of hanging there, but when the figure is just sort of standing straight up, if I can sort of hold it from the underside, you can see that we've got this sort of pyramid triangular shape sort of coming here. So it doesn't completely meet up, because if I sort of pull it there, it kind of wants to spring open a little bit. I really do like the shape of this. It's a thin fabric, so it's got a really fun drape to it. I'm always curious to sort of get a feel for the soft goods fabrics. This is definitely a thinner fabric. It's got some really good drape, and you can sort of see how well it flows over the shoulders. There is a seam in the side here. It comes up to about here. It doesn't go all the way over the shoulder, which I think is interesting. It kind of wants to kind of create a peak here, because the stitching goes to this point. It is black fabric, it's hard to see, but the stitching comes up to about here, and then we've just got this sort of fold over the shoulders, no seam. So it kind of wants to pucker out here, even though his shoulder is kind of more flatter tucked in here. So not as fond of that. I do like to sort of have a little bit more of the shape sort of following the figure underneath. And again, on this one, we can see that side seam running to about here, even though the shoulder of the figure is up here. So we've got the sort of this little bit of a bubble shape here. Again, might be very different when we actually get his arms out and do some poses. It is stitched closed quite a fair way down the front here. So you can kind of see that we've actually, it doesn't just sort of join just at the neck. We've actually got this line of stitching running down the front, joining the two sides together. So it's not going to be just at the neckline there. I do like the shape of the hood. It's got a little bit of wrinkles because, of course, this part is actually tucked behind the figure. I'm not as fond of how it sits around the face. I do like the fact that it comes under the chin, but we've kind of got these awkward little sort of ripples here. If I was to sort of just gently pull on the fabric and just kind of pull it a little bit more like this, I feel like that is a better shape, but you're probably only going to get a stiffer shape like that if we had perhaps some thin wire or thicker fabric. It just kind of wants to sort of fall in and ripple in close to the face, but I know that the scale and the price point of this one means that we're probably not going to get shaped wire or anything in the cloak there. Perhaps they could have done a little stitch or two to kind of hold the cloak out here, like we see on some figures, where sort of to get that peak we have the little stitches to sort of hold it onto the shoulders. Perhaps that would have been a better option. Something I do really like about this particular figure is the shape of the hood in the back. This can often be tricky. Different hoods, different cloaks have sort of different shapes, you know, Jawas are different and things like that, but I do like the shape of this one. And I think what you can sort of see is how it comes around here across the shoulders. And if I just lift it, you can kind of see just how sort of over the shoulders it kind of actually follows, because the neckline is actually tucked all the way in there. It's black on black, hard to show, but it is really nicely sort of sewn in shape. Just, you can see how well it sort of falls onto the shoulders there. Just a shame about the fabric around the face. I know it's probably different on different figures, how long they've been sitting there. It kind of looks a little bit better if I pull it back so that it's not kind of rippled around over the cheeks there a little bit. but really cool. For the sake of testing out the hem length, because you can see just how far beyond the boots that this is hanging, I'm just going to sort of go into the articulation of the arms. I usually do this later, but I want to see how it sits if I pull the arms up. They're a little bit stiff because this figure is fresh out of the packaging. They always just need a little bit of sort of a little bit of flexing there to really get a sense. Okay, so with his arms up, say he was doing a force move or holding a lightsaber. Now, just holding him by his boots because he's just a little bit unsteady, we can see that the cloak actually does still reach the floor, the ground. I'm holding it a little bit higher in the back to reach his boots, but we still get that full long length there for the cloak when he's got his arms out like he's doing a force move, or if he was holding his lightsaber in his hand. So I understand why it is so long there in the back. Just looks a little bit odd if you want him to sort of look like a mysterious cloaked figure walking down the Imperial Light Cruiser hallway. It is very long there in the front, but it does look much better when you put his arms out. Just kind of holds the shape open as well there, so we can see his tunic there on the underside. So I'm probably going to have him like I often do. If a character comes with a lightsaber, I'm going to put the lightsaber in his hand, extended, you know, battling those dark troopers down the hallway. Looks really cool. I don't think we need quite as much stitching here. I feel like it comes down a little bit far, and just the way that it's kind of shaped around his head it just kind of makes his head look a little higher. I think that's what's sort of bothering me, and the way that it's sort of flowing. It's not a real sort of Star Wars cloak shape around the face, but who knows, you know, maybe I can find just the right position to get that to sit a little bit better, because of course if we're going to recreate that awesome scene from The Mandalorian, then he really does need his cloak. Sometimes the soft goods you can go, well, you can pose them in the scene with or without them, it's up to you, but if you're going to put Luke Skywalker in a scene from The Mandalorian, then you're going to want his cloak on. So I feel like I don't really have the option to perhaps not pose him with this. I know we see him later on in the Book of Boba Fett, but his outfit is a little bit different there. He has sort of more of a more casual Jedi training outfit there. So I want to put this one in my Mandalorian collection, not Book of Boba Fett. So to check out the rest of his costume, I'm going to see how easy it is to take this off. I know I'm probably going to have the cloak displayed on this figure, but it's just easier to see all of the sort of detail and articulation with it out of the way. Also, this is pretty much standard across the Star Wars Hasbro line. You can kind of see the edges of this are already getting these little, they kind of look like tiny little cutouts, the sort of fraying there. Now with this kind of fabric, if it's not hemmed or anything like that, if you sort of pull it, you can kind of ladder it and damage the edges to it. And I also don't want to sort of get bits of fluff off and really sort of, shall we say, sort of wear down this nice crisp edge to it. It's, you know, really nice and at sharp points there. It looks really nice. The more you handle uncut, you know, sort of this fabric that's just been cut, it doesn't have any sort of protective edging to it, you can damage it and it just starts to sort of lose its overall sort of cleanliness with the attachments there. We can see that the hemming, the seams on the inside are also not sort of overlocked or serged. They are also unprotected. They're on the inside, so they're not going to get quite as much handling as this outer edge. But I can see it already looks like it's been pulled slightly, because I'm starting to get some of those little, they look like little cut-ins there. So I'm going to be very careful with it, and for that I'm going to take this off. Who knows, maybe if I put it back on later, it's going to sort of find a slightly better spot to fit. So very carefully pulling that over Luke's face, we can see just the tight stitching around that neckline. It fits in very tightly. Again, we've got no overlocking or anything there to protect those edges, so I'm going to be very careful with it, and that's how the whole thing looks. I kind of wish these side seams came up over the shoulders a little bit, just to kind of match the figure shape there a little bit. But overall, I like the length of it. It gives him a really sort of mysterious figure shape there, but I'm just going to pop that one there in the background. I am losing a few flecks of fabric there as well, something I don't like, so I'm going to be really careful with it. So now that we've got that cloak off, we can go over the figure here, and he looks fantastic. Now, figures of Luke over the years have had, so we say, mixed levels of accuracy. Mark Hamill, some characters, some actors have faces that have just been a little bit hit and miss when it came to sort of recreating it in action figure form. And the Lukes over the years never really quite look like Mark Hamill, but I think we're really getting a good level of likeness here. I like it, it looks like him. I think this is really quite neat. And of course, we've got that digital paintwork there on the face, so we don't get those sort of googly surprised eyes. This looks really nice. That looks like the hair is a separate piece that has been sculpted on. I think that that is a join there, which does give us sort of a better definition. And you also don't get sort of spillover of paint between the two. Sometimes when the hair is short and it's sculpted as part of the head, sometimes you get little patches where the skin sort of plastic color is on the hair, or the hair paint comes over onto the face. You get really nice definition there between the hair. Pretty good color too. I know sometimes Luke is sort of almost yellow blonde in some figures. Sometimes it's more of sort of a brown. I like the color here. I like the way that they have sort of sculpted the hair here. It looks like we've got, I don't know if there's, I'm trying to look and see. I don't know that we've got like a wash or anything, and I think it's just the highs and lows of the actual sculpting that's giving a bit of a depth and darker shadows to the hair. I don't think there is a wash over this. I think that's just the brown. Looks really nice though. Really fun painting there for the eyebrows as well. And those eyes, just fantastic. I think we've got maybe just a hint of color for the lips. Really nice. So moving on to his tunic. A lot of similarities here to his tunic in the original trilogy, because of course the Mandalorian is set afterwards. Really nice. I feel like this tunic is sort of black, but with the tiniest little undertone of, say, a dark green, just to give it a slightly lighter tone to the black that we see of the under tunic and the pants. It just looks just a shade sort of different. Not really lighter. It's not really giving me like a gray. It almost looks like a black with like a really dark green undertone to it, which I kind of like, because of course Luke has a green lightsaber. I kind of like that. I just like the distinction between the colors. Sometimes if something's all black, it just reads very flat and very plasticky. I'm thinking about the sort of the Hasbro value range figures, you know, where they sort of paint them all black, and they just look a little flat. I like the texture as well that they've managed to replicate here. You can sort of see the grain of these sort of tabard pieces there. Really nice. And then of course we've got much more of sort of a glossier one for his tunic. His arms look a little bit odd because I've kind of bent them just out of the way. Not a pose that I would probably put him in there. It looks a little bit better when I put them in like that. Nice tidy paint job here for the small details on the belt. His iconic silver belt buckle here. We've got two very small studs off to the right hand side there. We've got some small studs for a small ring and a little hook here, because the lightsaber accessory has a hook at the end. So if we remove the blade, we can hang the lightsaber hilt on his belt. The back of the belt is plain, no details there. He doesn't have pouches or anything like that like prequel Jedi do. Just a plain one there. We can see the sort of the sash, the fabric section running underneath the belt that comes all the way around. Overall, really nice. There's a little bit of sort of a glossy section here that's catching the light a little bit differently than over this side, but of course paint is always going to be just a little bit varied from figure to figure. Overall, of course, there's not much in the way of paint, so it should be very tidy. Nice to see that. Okay, the tunic looks pretty good here in the back as well. I like the sculpting, sort of giving us the way that fabric would drape and get drawn in around the waist, and then it flares out here a little bit with the end of the tabards and sort of the tunic end there. And we've got a really nice tidy definition between the tunic here and the sleeves. Sometimes, because of course we have to have articulation, sometimes it's a bit exposed and you can kind of see into some of the articulation there tucked underneath, but really nice and tight and tidy there at the top of the shoulders. I like that. We've got a really nice collar coming up there that looks like separate plastic around the neck, because I think I can see sort of more shadowing there. So it's a really nice definition there. Sometimes with the high collared characters, it's painted and then it's really hard to get find a figure with like really tidy paint lines around the neck. But that looks like separate plastic pieces, so there's absolutely no paint spill over there because they're not painted. Really nice. Now, the bottom half of Luke's sort of Jedi costume, it always seems a little bit funny calling it a Jedi costume because it's so black. But of course, he has plain pants for the most part and plain boots. Very Imperial on the lower half. Of course, he's taking, inspiration from his father. We've got some stitch lines there running down the side of his pants. There's like a little bit of a patterned stripe, really, really minimal. Sort of a patterned stripe, black on black there. And it's on the other side. Kind of reminds me of the Corellian blood stripes on the pants that we have in the original trilogy. But that's kind of like black. It's really, really subtle black lines. Really interesting. You can see that matching up over the knee articulation segment. There doesn't seem to be any kind of detail on the boots here. We don't have any sort of small buckles or anything like that. We've got a small line running down the outside. That's on both sides. And we've just got that lovely pebbled texture to sort of give it a leather boot. So it doesn't just look like flat, shiny plastic. So yeah, not as much detail. The skirt, the bottom half of the tunic I should say, doesn't have a slit at the sides like some do to sort of help us articulate it. And this doesn't feel very rubbery. It actually feels, it's a tiny bit rubbery, but not very flexible. I'm not really able to move it much. If I sort of tip him forward, I can see that we do have that sort of swivel point really high on the thighs, pretty much right underneath where they attach. So I should be able to get a little bit of swivel movement there. It's a bit stiff because he's out of the package, but I can just articulate him at that line. Really hard to see, black on black, really high. I do like that they have hidden it under the hem of his tunic here, because that's generally like, I think though, I want to say that the articulation point's generally closer to sort of here on the thighs, but they've done it really high up so it hides underneath that. And I do like that, because sometimes when it is the same sort of monotone color, black on black, the seams kind of hide. But because he's got nothing really as detail on his pants, I think that that articulation point would just stand out a little bit more. So I do like the fact that they've hidden it underneath. And then even the joints at the knees are just sort of nice and tight, hidden in the sort of the folds that you generally get when you tuck pants into knee-high boots there. So we've just got sort of that little wrinkling there at the bottom of those pants that's doing a pretty good job of hiding the articulation. A little bit more noticeable here in the back, but black on black. Much better than the old style of those big pins that were sort of very, very visible from the side. I was never a fan of that style of articulation. So if I straighten up his arms, we can have a look at how well the tunic sleeves here, really nice. We've kind of got a little creasing here on the inside of the arms. I don't think there's any sort of stitch lines or anything that I'm really seeing here. Nothing down the back of the arms or on the outside. And of course, we've got one gloved hand, one ungloved hand. Nice skin tone there. So we don't have any, they just rotate. We don't have any additional. Sometimes you can see, oh no, there we go. So just hiding on the black one. Wow, that's tucked in. Couldn't see that. Very, very tucked in there, right at the base of the hand. When it was sitting like that, I couldn't see it. But yes, I can just, the sleeves come down very close to where these hands are inserted. And then we can just see that one there. Not too much movement because the tunic sleeves come down. I get a little bit of a side to side. There's a bit of a click, and of course we can rotate them easily. That's very hidden. I almost didn't see that. Very tucked in there next to the tunic. So he's going to be able to move his arms. Oh, okay. I thought this might be a little bit more of an easy one to move, but you can see I am actually distorting the tunic. It's bubbling out here. So it's a little bit of flexibility, but as soon as I start to rotate his arm up here, I'm starting to bend that, increase it to get his arm all the way up. I can rotate it up. That's not stopping me exactly, but I'm creasing it there, you can see. So I'm probably not going to put his arm up that high for display, because that is actually creasing the edge of his tunic there. But interesting. I was wondering if that might, yeah, not as bad on this side, but you can see it's starting to go up his arm. But yes, so I do like how tight that is though. I'm willing to sort of make that compromise. I like the fact that it's just neat and fitted around the arm, and it's not stopping me from moving it all the way up. And he's got good elbows here. They move nicely, easy to pose. A little bit of sort of a cutout on certain poses, but I like just how nice and tight they look. When I sort of bend this one out to the side, you can sort of see, of course, the shape starts to get a little bit distorted, but you're going to find that with most figures, that the sculpting follows the lines better in some angles than others, but overall, pretty good. You can see I can turn his head round, getting some good posability there. Doesn't go all the way down, and it isn't because of the collar, but he gets, oh, there we go. It's stiff actually. Sits all the way down to the collar, goes all the way down, kind of stopping there because of the hair in the back. I can turn it around. Now he does have sort of not quite mid-torso. This is down around the waist. Oh, very stiff. Oh, that's fighting me a lot. So he's very stiff there, and he really wants to click back. So because we've got the fabric on the original costume, it would flow underneath the belt and come down here. I don't necessarily think I'll be sort of twisting him to the side, because this starts to, you know, really become misaligned here. And he's a little bit fighty. It does a much better job of front and back. I can bend him actually quite a fair way back compared to some other figures. It doesn't expose anything weird here. It's just nice. And it's pretty tight. I can get a little bit of a view in there, but it's not kind of sitting around him. Really nice and snug here with the belt there in the back, because sometimes there's a little bit of a gap around the waist to be able to get that articulation in there. But very nice, and he stood pretty well out of the packaging. Sometimes they've got the cloaks on, it's easier to pose them with the cloaks off, just so you can see where everything is lining up in terms of the legs and everything. I'm gonna spend a little bit of time getting into some good poses there, because I want him to be wearing the cloak, looking mysterious, coming down action figure all the way there. But of course, he needs his lightsaber for that. So let's look at this. So of course, he has his original trilogy lightsaber. Like the Black series, we have the hilt and the blade, which are removable. Have to say the green on this is a little bit paler than I thought it might be. It's kind of a little bit light in terms of the color, but I like the translucency, and we've got some fantastic detail on the hilt here. So it looks like we've got a little bit of a highlight here. Definitely looks darker. I feel like there's a highlight in here to sort of really show off those rings. We've got gold, and you can see that little attachment ring there at the end, so we can hang it on the belt. So I don't like pulling the blades off these. I wish that we had both a hilt and a full lit lightsaber, so we don't need to pull the blades off, because they have very small attachment points. You can see, because we have that narrow neck emitter on Luke's lightsaber, the peg for this doesn't really have a lot of space. So I'm curious to see how well this one's going to come off, and I'm hoping. Oh, okay, very short. I knew it was going to be short. That's very short. So in some ways, the short sort of little attachment point means that it's going to be it's not really going to have a lot of grip there. But sometimes those short attachment points means that the blades are a little bit off center. So they sort of go a little bit askew, but we can see that little attachment point. And I'm just going to try this on his belt, because of course we've got this little hook here. So how well is this going to fit? It's a little tight. It's not going on as easily as I thought. I thought it might just sort of hang. I'm feeling, nope. Okay. There we go. It was very tight, and you can see, I don't know if that was intentional, but that has split. That was a very tight little peg hole, and I can now, sadly, there's a split in it. So, I don't like the fact that we have to use this one piece to do the different things. I cannot get that on to this hook because that has a split to it, and it didn't want to go on. If I'm sitting it like that, you can kind of see. So that's what it should look like. But just at the top of that attachment hook, there is a small split. So not my favorite thing. I do not like risking damage, or like this, damaging things. I recently, this one is kind of connected because I recently opened up the Black Series figure for the Dark Trooper. That's going to be in the hallway. That does go back on nicely, I have to say. But there's the swappable hands for the Dark Trooper. You've got one that's more sort of like a grip for the blaster, or the sort of punching fist. And if you swap them out, we discovered that one of the pieces broke. And swapping between hands shouldn't risk breaking pieces. They should be easier to do that. And I often get worried with the small little pegs that go into the belts on the Vintage Collection 3.75-inch figures. I'm like, if that one ever breaks, then you've got like a bit of plastic just forced into a peg hole and it's snapped off. I am a little bit upset that that just snapped so easily trying to put that on there. I do like to see how they look there, but I'm annoyed that it's not too visible, but it shouldn't break. So let's test this out in his hand, because this is how I'm going to have mine on display. Now I'm going to be really careful with that little attachment point, because that's what I'm pushing through here. Okay, so that goes in pretty easily, not having to sort of fight that too much. It's kind of getting a little bit stuck on that sort of emitter box. I'm just going to take that off and let's push that through. There we go. Okay, so that holds pretty well, looks nice. That box kind of fits there nicely, just under the fingers, his thumb wrapping around very nicely. And now I can put the blade back on. There. So, looks good. Now Luke has his lightsaber. Not quite sure. I kind of wish sometimes for characters that don't have anything else to hold, that we got more of just a different hand to just the standard C grip, like a force push or just something, or maybe even just more of a neutral hand. I've got nothing to put in this hand, but he always looks like he's doing this, and it's not even, it doesn't even sort of look like a force choke hand. It just kind of looks like he's cupping something. I can't describe why that looks different, but it kind of looks like, you know, he's supposed to be holding something that he's not, rather than doing more of a force choke move. So I kind of wish it was just a slightly different hand, you know, just neutral or something else, but he just looks pretty cool once you get all of that together. Of course, I'm going to work on the poses, but let's get his cloak back on, because I think that's going to be, you know, the definitive look. So I'm going to take this out of the way. At least this one, it doesn't have sleeves, so it should be easier to slip this on, because I don't need to do anything sort of too complicated to get it back on. Okay, so really easy to put back on. It's sitting, I don't know if that's maybe a little bit better. Still kind of a little bit close to his face. This side in particular, not sure that I can do much about that. So if I get his hand out, and then we can put his lightsaber blade back in. There we go. There. So now we have Luke as we see him in the Mandalorian. Really cool. He does stand very steady, which I'm glad about. I know I haven't sort of tweaked all of his limbs there. I like how full this cloak is. I sort of thought it was odd that it was so long, but if you have his hands out, especially with the lightsaber, it just makes sure that it doesn't look too short. I like how long it is there in the front, really sort of covers. A little bit quirky there in the face, but overall it looks really cool. I was really excited to see these side by side, so I grabbed my Black Series 6-inch Dark Trooper that I recently opened up and wanted to see it side by side with my new Luke Skywalker Imperial Light Cruiser 6-inch figure. You can see the difference in height. Of course, the Dark Troopers are supposed to be taller than people, but it just looks really cool. A lot of black going on, and I really want to army build just a huge amount of Dark Troopers to really fill out my scene here with Luke. Really fun to see these side by side. I was so disappointed that I couldn't find this Luke figure during that original plastic-free packaging release, so I'm really happy to see it being reissued in the archive line so I can add him to my collection, because of course I had the Dark Troopers. I want Luke to go there with them. I know we see the Dark Troopers facing off with other characters, but honestly I think it was just such a impactful scene when Luke came through the corridors that I just really wanted to put Luke beside them, and now I have him. Still, I think there is a few things with the cape that I would change if I was trying to make this figure myself, but I know that it is tricky to sort of mass produce these things, so maybe some crafty people out there will edit it themselves, but I generally don't bother. I'm sure it will look a little bit better with a little bit of tweaking with the poses, but yeah, it looks really cool when I put the arms out and just the way that it flows like that. It looks really cool. I gotta track down more of these guys. I want a huge cluster of them to face off against Luke. Really happy to have this one now in my collection. It's a little bit of a sad moment there with the hook at the bottom of the lightsaber hilt, but it doesn't really draw my eye. It's a very small component, but still, I don't like it when things on my Star Wars collectibles break. I really try hard not to damage anything like that, but overall, looks fantastic. Really happy. Nothing wrong with the paint job on this one. Really nice. He stands well, looks awesome. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today as I opened up another Star Wars Black Series figure, checked out all of the details, and had a lot of fun. I hope you have a wonderful morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are in the galaxy, and let's hang out again very soon for more Star Wars fun. May the Force be with you. If you're a Black Series fan, I've also unboxed the Dark Trooper figure. That video is linked here in case you haven't already seen it, as well as a whole Black Series unboxing playlist. This is the way.